state and federal leaders are sounding the alarm bells on what they call California's dwindling supply of oil produced in-state.
We have an energy crisis in our state, and it looks like it is only going to intensify.
The refinery needs to ensure that the contractors on site are fully trained and can do the work, and they failed in that regard.
A critical report out today slams the Martinez refining company over a 3-day fire that burned back in February. The report examining what's to blame for the blaze.
Republican lawmakers, including Congressman Vince Fong and State Assemblymember Stan Ellis, both of Bakersfield, say the imminent closure of 2 major California refineries, Valero in the Bay Area city of Benicia and Phillips 66 in Los Angeles, is concerning, with reports showing that could reduce the state's refining capacity by nearly 20%.
By 2026, California's fuel system will be operating with almost no margin for error. 1 accident, 1 fire, 1 unexpected shutdown, and prices could spike like the state has never seen before. In just 2 years, California lost nearly 1/5 of its gasoline refining capacity, and now it's importing fuel from halfway around the world to keep cars moving. This isn't a future problem. It's already happening. This is the story of how California went from 12 refineries supplying the state's fuel down to just 8 operating facilities today, and why that shift is creating a supply crisis, pushing gas prices higher while forcing the state to import fuel from as far away as India. Over the next 15 minutes, we're breaking down exactly what's happening with California's fuel supply, why refineries are closing their doors, and what it means for anyone filling up in California, Arizona, or Nevada. 2 major refinery closures are reshaping California's fuel landscape right now, and the numbers tell a stark story. October 16, 2024, Phillips 66 announced it would shut down its Wilmington refinery near Los Angeles by the end of 2025. This facility processes 139,000 barrels per day, which represents about 8% of California's total refining capacity, and 600 employees plus 300 contractors are losing their jobs. Mid-October 2025 arrived, and the refinery wrapped up crude processing, staying on schedule to close completely by year's end. Then April 2025 brought another bombshell when Valero announced they're closing their Benicia refinery by the end of April 2026. This one's even bigger at 145,000 barrels per day, accounting for about 9% of California's gasoline capacity, and over 400 workers will lose their jobs when it happens. Valero took a combined pre-tax impairment charge of $1.1 billion for their California operations, and that included $337 million in expected asset retirement obligations. Combined, California is losing 284,000 barrels per day of refining capacity, which works out to 17% of the state's total. Valero is also evaluating what they call strategic alternatives for its Wilmington refinery, and if that closes too, total capacity loss could hit 21%. This trend started years ago. 6 refineries have closed in California since 2008, with the Marathon Martinez refinery shutting down in 2020 and taking 157,000 barrels per day offline. Phillips 66 converted their Rodeo refinery to renewable diesel production in early 2024, removing it from crude oil processing entirely. Back in 2019, 12 refineries supplied the California market. Today, only 8 remain operational. The math gets uncomfortable when you look at supply and demand. California consumed about 1.395 million barrels of fuel per day in 2024, while current capacity sits at about 1.68 million barrels per calendar day. After these closures complete in 2026, capacity drops to around 1.4 million barrels per day, leaving a surplus of just 6.3%, and experts are calling that a precarious balance. Severin Borenstein from UC Berkeley didn't mince words when he said these 2 latest refinery closures would reduce total production in California faster than in-state consumption will plausibly decline, and if that happens with nothing else changing, the result would be a severe gasoline shortage and likely an unprecedented price increase. The Martinez fire. Right in the middle of all this planning and closure announcements, disaster struck on a Saturday afternoon. February 1st, 2025, around 1:30 p.m., a massive fire broke out at the PBF Martinez refinery. This facility processes 156,000 barrels per day, about 10% of California's total production, and the fire burned for 3 solid days before firefighters fully extinguished it on February 4th. At least 6 people suffered injuries during the incident. The environmental release was substantial, with 170 barrels, that's 7,940 gallons, of hydrocarbon material spilling out, and most of it consumed by the flames. Over 500 pounds of sulfur dioxide got released due to flaring, and cancer-causing chemicals including benzene, hydrogen sulfide, and xylene went into the air around the facility. What followed was a 2-month complete shutdown. Limited restart came in April, with full operations not expected until the end of 2025, and the timing couldn't have been worse since California was already facing capacity constraints when suddenly 10% of production went offline, right as demand typically picks up. June 2025 brought an independent investigation by GEM advisors that revealed human error caused the fire. 2 contract union workers mistakenly loosened bolts on a flange that was full of hot hydrocarbons, and the report cited worker inexperience and lack of supervision as direct causes. What made it more troubling was something systemic in the findings. California regulations, specifically SB 54 from 2013, require refineries to hire contractors from local union halls and co-employment rules that investigators said contributed to safety challenges. One team created the maintenance plan while a completely different team executed it without the necessary supervision. Dr. Ori Tzvili, the Contra Costa County health officer, captured what many in the community felt when he said this could have been much worse, that we got lucky this time, but our community shouldn't have to rely on luck. This marked the 3rd major incident at Martinez since PBF Energy bought the refinery from Shell in 2020 for $1.2 billion. November 2022 saw the refinery release over 20 tons of toxic chemicals, and 2023 alone brought 21 instances of releases or spills. The price impact. What does all this mean for the number you see at the pump? December 2025 has California's average gas price sitting between $4.45 and $4.59 per gallon, while the national average hovers around $2.95 to $3.02. That works out to a premium of $1.47 to $1.64 per gallon just for living in California. Context matters here, though. October 1st, 2024, had Californians paying $4.68 per gallon, while the national average was $3.20, and in 2024, California's average actually dropped 20 cents per gallon compared to 2023 and fell 70 cents lower than 2022. According to the California Energy Commission, Californians avoided about $2.5 billion in costs compared to 2023 and $9.3 billion compared to 2022. When you break down where that $4.50 goes, the numbers get revealing. Federal tax takes 18 cents, state excise tax grabs about 60 cents, and that increased by 1.6 cents on July 1st, 2025. State sales tax adds 10 cents, and the underground storage tank fee tax on 2 cents. Roughly 90 cents per gallon in taxes and fees alone as of March 2025. Looking ahead, expert projections show increases coming. USC models estimated the Phillips 66 closure alone would add between 8 and 14 cents per gallon by the end of 2025. But when you factor in all the regulatory changes and closures, estimates for regular grade gasoline range from 55 cents to almost 90 cents per gallon in additional costs during 2025. Premium could see increases of 95 cents to $1.15 per gallon. For the average California driver traveling 12,524 miles per year and getting about 31 miles per gallon, that translates to an extra $222 to $449 per year just for regular fuel. Because that's after-tax spending, you'd need to earn $600 to $1,000 more in pre-tax income just to offset it. The import dependency, California's fuel situation, gets really interesting when you look at where replacement supply is coming from and the vulnerability that creates. May 2025 saw California's total petroleum imports hit 279,000 barrels per day, the highest level since June 2021. Gasoline imports specifically topped 210,000 barrels per day on a 4-week average, setting a record high. Where's this fuel coming from? India, South Korea, Taiwan, and China now supply 75% of California's imported gasoline, with India becoming the largest supplier over the past 2 years at an average of about 13,000 barrels per day. May 2025 brought 39,000 barrels per day from India, the highest since January 2024, and total shipments from India reached 6.56 million barrels. South Korea and the United Kingdom each average around 11,000 barrels per day. Russia was sending about 5,600 barrels per day during the March to July period, and even Canada got into the game with 3.77 million barrels over 2 years. One peculiar detail stands out. Imports from the Bahamas hit a record 38,000 barrels per day in May 2025. The Bahamas doesn't produce oil, and what's actually happening is fuel getting routed through the Caribbean as a workaround for the Jones Act, that century-old shipping law limiting domestic fuel movement between U.S. ports to domestically built U.S. crude ships. Only 55 Jones Act-compliant petroleum tankers existed as of early 2024, which means moving fuel from the U.S. Gulf Coast to California is limited to less than 1,000 barrels per day because of the cost and scarcity of compliant tankers. This matters because California uses CARBOB, which stands for California Reformulated Blend Stock for oxygenate blending. It's unique to California, and only properly equipped refineries can manufacture it, with few international refineries able to meet these specifications, though some facilities in India and South Korea have figured it out. Phillips 66 is planning to produce some California-grade gasoline at their Washington refinery to help fill the gap. The vulnerability is real. Fuel from Asia takes 3 to 6 weeks to arrive. That's a lot longer response time than getting supply from a refinery 2 hours away, and Arizona and Nevada also depend on California refiners for their unique fuel blends. KPLR analyst Sumit Ritolia laid it out plainly when he said California's refining capacity is shrinking faster than its fuel demand is declining, forcing the state into a long-term, import-dependent position. The regulatory response. California's government responded with a flurry of legislation trying to address the situation, though the timing of some announcements raised eyebrows. October 14, 2024, brought Governor Gavin Newsom's signature on AB X2E1, which took effect on January 13, 2025. This law authorizes the California Energy Commission to set and adjust minimum petroleum product inventory levels for refiners, letting the CEC require refiners to plan for resupply during maintenance outages and adjust minimum storage volumes based on regional conditions, seasonal demand, refinery size, and storage capacity. Newsom claimed this would prevent price spikes that cost Californians upwards of $2 billion last year. 2 days later, October 16th, Phillips 66 announced they were closing the Wilmington refinery. March 2023 had already brought SB X12, which created the Division of Petroleum Market Oversight, an independent watchdog within the Energy Commission focused on market oversight and transparency. Then came the low carbon fuel standard updates. November 8, 2024, saw the California Air Resources Board vote to strengthen these standards, and they took effect in July 2025 with aggressive goals of a 30% reduction in carbon intensity by 2030 and a 90% reduction by 2045. What this costs at the pump depends entirely on who you ask. CARB officials say 5 to 8 cents per gallon, while an initial CARB assessment from 2023 estimated 47 cents for gasoline and 59 cents for diesel in 2025, though they later backed away from those numbers. The University of Pennsylvania's Kleinman Center projected 85 cents per gallon through 2030, and industry-aligned estimates range from 40 to 65 cents in the first year, with the potential to reach over $1 per gallon. Currently, the LCFS pass-through cost runs about 8 to 10 cents per gallon as of 2024. October 2nd, 2025, brought Newsom's signature on legislation allowing gas stations to sell E15 fuel, which is gasoline with 15% ethanol instead of the current 10%. A study from UC Berkeley and the U.S. Naval Academy claimed this could save up to 20 cents per gallon and potentially $2.7 billion annually. but experts predict limited adoption since few stations are likely to actually offer it. September 2025 saw the governor sign SB 237, increasing crude oil production in Kern County by allowing up to 2,000 new drilling permits and streamlining the well approval process. This represents a notable shift from Newsom's previous anti-oil stance, and the state also paused implementation of a refinery margin cap for at least 5 years in September 2025. The debate. Who's to blame for this situation depends entirely on who you ask, and the positions are starkly different. The Western States Petroleum Association, founded in 1907 and representing 150,000 workers in Western states, argues that regulations are causing unintended consequences, including capacity reductions and refinery closures. Catherine Reheist Boyd, the association's president and CEO, warned that minimum inventory requirements and profit margin caps would lead to exactly what we're seeing now, and the industry position holds that California has evolved into a fuel island disconnected from the national market. Refiners lost billions during COVID in 2020 and 2021, and the argument goes they need periods with higher margins to pay for maintenance and regulatory investments. Republican lawmakers haven't held back. Assembly Republican leader James Gallagher said once again, Californians are paying the price for Newsom's incompetence and self-serving attacks on energy producers, adding that unless the state changes course, the job losses and gas price increases are only going to get worse. Representative Brian Jones from California's Republican delegation blamed what he called Newsom and radical Democrats' extreme regulations and hostile business climate. Representative Vince Fong raised national security concerns, pointing out that California hosts over 30 military bases, and that bases in Nevada and Arizona also rely on California fuel production. These refineries produce jet fuel, diesel, and gasoline for the military, and Fong warned the closures threaten not only consumer prices at the pump, but also the state's military readiness. Valero's CEO, Lane Riggs, described California's regulatory environment as the most stringent and difficult in North America, citing 20 years of policies pursuing a move away from fossil fuels. The state government pushes back hard on the regulation narrative. They argue closures are driven by market forces, not just regulations, and point to Phillips 66's own CEO, Mark Lashier, stating the closure decision was not an immediate response to any policy changes, but was due to expectation that refining business in the state would become increasingly challenging. October 2024 found him working with leading land development firms to evaluate the future use of what he called their unique and strategically located properties near the Port of Los Angeles. Weak refinery margins support the state's case. The Los Angeles CARBOB crack spread dropped to 50 cents per gallon in May 2024, which was half of what it was the previous May and the lowest since 2019. More international refining capacity exists now, and demand is weaker compared to 2022 and 2023, which means narrower spreads for all U.S. refiners. California's gasoline demand is actually declining too. Taxable sales fell from 15.6 billion barrels in 2017 to 13.6 billion in 2023, and the third quarter of 2025 saw Californians purchase 124,755 zero-emission vehicles, the highest quarterly sales share ever. October 2nd, 2025, had Governor Newsom claiming that thanks to their work with the legislature, they have averted billions of dollars in higher costs at the pump by avoiding the kinds of severe gasoline price spikes seen a few years ago. The academic view acknowledges complexity in the situation. Experts note that any shortfalls will be filled by non-U.S. refiners, which means prices will be set by the most expensive foreign refiner rather than in-state production costs. Whether California likes it or not, it's a global market now. Conclusion. California sits in the middle of a fundamental transition that's playing out in real time. The state that once had 12 refineries supplying its unique fuel blend now has 8, and that number is about to drop. Phillips 66's Wilmington facility is closed or closing by the end of this year, while Valero's Benicia refinery stays on track for April 2026, despite state efforts to keep it open. After years of major incidents, PBF's Martinez facility is planning to return to full operations by the end of 2025. Import dependency on Asia is increasing, with fuel taking weeks to arrive instead of hours. A complex web of regulations aimed at stabilizing prices and reducing carbon emissions is being implemented while the state simultaneously tries to increase domestic drilling. Gas prices have stayed relatively stable in 2025 compared to the spikes of 2022 and 2023, though projections suggest increases are coming. Assemblymember Stan Ellis from Bakersfield noted that California already imports about 20% of refined petroleum products from India, and that share could double after the closures. In a world of global instability, supply lines stretching across the Pacific Ocean carry their own risks. California's fuel supply challenge boils down to this: a shrinking refining base, increasing import dependency, conflicting policy goals, and genuine disagreement about whether regulations or market forces are primarily responsible. For the millions of people filling up their tanks in California, Arizona, and Nevada, the abstract debate about energy policy has concrete consequences measured in dollars and cents at every gas station. The question isn't whether California's fuel supply is changing, because it clearly is. The question is whether the state's strategy of regulating towards stability while transitioning away from fossil fuels can work faster than its refining capacity is disappearing. Right now, we're watching that experiment play out in real time, one refinery closure at a time.